Stan Lee's career blessed us with a dazzling array of characters, and we're on a quest to celebrate some of his contributions to the darker side of the Marvel Universe, the villains. These characters, co-created by Stan Lee, are not just antagonists, they're complex figures that have captivated readers for generations. Join us as we delve into the top 10 villains co-created by Stan Lee. Let's get started. Number 10, Juggernaut.
Sticks and stones will break my bones, but tanks will never hurt me. Now get out of my way.
Juggernaut, whose real name is Kane Marco, first appeared in X-Men number 12 in July 1965, co-created by Stan Lee and Jack Kirby. He's renowned for his unstoppable momentum, resulting in formidable physical capabilities that make him a daunting opponent for the X-Men. He is physically imposing with a visual design to match, from his massive physique to his distinct helmet, making Juggernaut's silhouette easily recognizable among the many Marvel villains. It's worth noting that despite being a prominent member of the Brotherhood of Mutants, Juggernaut is not a mutant. Instead, his powers are derived from the Crimson Gem of Cyttorak, which grants him his abilities. Juggernaut is the stepbrother of Professor Charles Xavier, whom he resents due to their upbringing. While growing up, Kane felt that his father, Kurt Marco, favored Charles over him, and often subjected Kane to abuse. This treatment led Kane to harbor resentment towards Charles, eventually manifesting in bullying. This backstory creates a deep personal connection to the X-Men and unveils one of the Juggernaut's greatest vulnerabilities. Despite his near indestructibility, Juggernaut is psychologically vulnerable, prone to emotional instability stemming from his past.
Stop it! I can't stand it!
This often leads him to let anger and frustration cloud his judgment. All of this makes Juggernaut not just a great villain, but also a character with depth, not commonly seen among the musclehead figures in the world of superheroes and villains. Number 9. Annihilus, created by Stan Lee and Jack Kirby. Annihilus was a warlord from the Negative Zone, a parallel dimension of Earth's reality. Annihilus was naturally gifted with super strength and flight, but what made him even more dangerous was the cosmic control rod that Annihilus held, which granted him immortality through slow aging and the ability to restructure matter. Annihilus's origins in the Negative Zone also gave him access to tech not available in the dimension our Marvel heroes hail from. Annihilus was originally introduced in the Fantastic Four comics, but because of the scale of their threats, it was natural for Annihilus to go against other heroes such as the Guardians of the Galaxy. As for his threats, Annihilus wasn't a planet-level threat, nor a galactic-level threat. He was a universal-level threat, giving the Marvel Universe a threat never quite seen before, which is why Annihilus makes this list in number 9.
Forwards! And attack! Destroy anything in your path!
Number 8. Loki. Loki debuted in the pages of Journey into Mystery number 85 in October 1962, co-created by Stan Lee, his brother Larry Lieber, and Jack Kirby. Obviously inspired by the Norse god of the same name, Loki has only grown in popularity in recent years, especially for his increased complexity as a villain and anti-hero. He oozes with personality and has a blend of charm and intelligence, fitting for the god of mischief. His ability to shapeshift and create illusions not only adds to his chaos, but creates a sense of unease and mistrust whenever he's at the center of any situation.
I know I've betrayed you many times before, but this time it's truly nothing personal.
Since his inception, Loki's rocky relationship as Thor's adopted brother has always been a recurring theme and a cornerstone of his character. Thor receives praise and recognition from his peers and is the heir to rule Asgard, which constantly puts Loki in his shadow. Additionally, because of his origins as a frost giant, Loki deals with feelings of otherness and constantly seeks validation and power. He'll do anything to achieve his goals, even turning to villainous acts, even if his attempts end in tragedy. What's great is that he never fully commits to being a villain and is in a constant cycle of villainy and redemption. Due to his personality, fans often find themselves unsure of how to feel about Loki, with emotions ranging from frustration to sympathy, and it's these complex feelings he's able to bring out of fans that makes him so good. As mentioned earlier, Loki's popularity only grows and his legacy is only strengthened by his appearance in multiple films in the MCU, as well as 2 seasons of his eponymous TV series. Number 7. Mephisto. First appearing in Silver Surfer number 3 as the co-creation of Stan Lee and John Buscema, Mephisto is basically Marvel's version of Satan. But even saying that dilutes the deeds he's done within the Marvel comics. He is the embodiment of evil, and his association with Satan comes from his acts that align with things Satan would have done himself, including ruling over a hell-like dimension and taking part in temptation, deceit, and bargains with Faustian consequences. Mephisto is typically associated with the Silver Surfer and Ghost Rider. Mephisto's adversarial relationship with the Silver Surfer stems from Mephisto's desire to corrupt the Silver Surfer, whom he finds has a pure and noble soul. It's classic good versus evil. On the other hand, his involvement with the Ghost Rider is a little different, where his pact with Johnny Blaze eventually turned Blaze into Ghost Rider. With Mephisto, we even got a peek into Marvel's spiritual side,
Would you be willing to make a deal?
with the character's deeds having effects not only on the physical realm, but also the spiritual. In one story, Mephisto basically captures the soul of Cynthia Von Doom, Doctor Doom's mother, and traps it in hell, and Doom has to team up with Doctor Strange to rescue her soul in order to send her to heaven. Wild. Number 6, Galactus, debuting in Fantastic Four number 48 in March 1966 and co-created by Stan Lee and Jack Kirby. Galactus is a cosmic scale entity who eats planets because he's hungry. He is the devourer of worlds. It doesn't matter what he eats. He only eats to survive and is indifferent about the planets themselves, although he does favor ones with life forms on it because, life energy and all that. What makes Galactus different from a lot of the villains on this list is that he isn't all that evil. According to Stan Lee, there would be world conquerors in the Marvel Universe and in all the other comic book galaxies. Why not have him not be a really evil person? After all, a demigod should be beyond mere good and evil. He'd just be, don't laugh, hungry. And the nourishment he'd require is the life force and energy from living planets. Even Galactus' hunger for Earth isn't out of any malice, just his need to feed. But what makes Galactus daunting outside of his indifference was his stature. Galactus was huge, on a scale not seen yet in Marvel Comics. Jack Kirby even said this of Galactus. For some reason, I went to the Bible and I came up with Galactus, and there I was in front of this tremendous figure, who I knew very well because I've always felt him. When heroes go up against Galactus, the odds are stacked against them, which leads to battles on an epic scale, and it's why this existential menace deserves to be on this list.
They dare steal from Galactus. For that, I will destroy their planet.
Number 5. Possibly one of my favorite villains, we have Dr. Octopus, who was co-created by Stan Lee and Steve Ditko and made his debut in The Amazing Spider-Man number 3 in July 1963. Dr. Octopus was once the brilliant, albeit a little prideful and egoistic, scientist Otto Octavius. However, the harness he wore, featuring additional arms, eventually becomes one with his body through a freak accident in his lab. Because of this, his mind and body are forever changed, which becomes the catalyst to his villainy. The story changes ever so slightly depending on which version of Doc Ock you're following, but the results are mostly the same. A tragic story of someone trying to contribute to society through their research, but is ultimately transformed by the very thing they love to do. Like many villains on this list, Dr. Octopus has an iconic design that is immediately recognizable and visually striking, setting him apart from his fellow cohorts. We've seen many iterations of Dr. Octopus in media outside of the comics as well, such as the terrifying Carnage Dr. Octopus from Spider-Man on the PS1, which gave me nightmares as a kid, the tragic Otto Octavius in Insomniac's Spider-Man for the PS4, which made me cry, Alfred Molina's take on Dr. Octopus in Sam Raimi's Spider-Man 2, which is probably one of my favorite villains ever, and even the female Doc Ock, Liv, from Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. If that is not a testament to the popularity and importance of Dr. Octopus, I don't know what is. You can even blame Doc Ock for the creation of the Sinister Six, a group of villains consisting of some of the best in Spider-Man's rogues gallery.
Power of the sun in the palm of my hand. Nothing will stand in our way.
Number 4, Kingpin. Kingpin, co-created by Stan Lee and John Romita Sr., made his first appearance in The Amazing Spider-Man number 50. Otherwise known as Wilson Fisk, Kingpin is a villain who has absolutely no superhuman powers, and instead relies solely on his physical attributes, vast connections within the criminal underworld, and corruption within the legal system to get his way. Starting out as one of Spider-Man's enemies, Kingpin was a crime lord who got his hands dirty. Later, the character would find himself involved in a lot of Daredevil stories, and he would eventually be depicted as a scheming and cold-blooded crime lord, to the point where people even considered him Daredevil's arch-nemesis. Kingpin has a lot of power. He has an army of thugs to do his bidding, he possesses so much money that politicians and law enforcement won't even make a move on him, and at one point, he even becomes the mayor of New York City. He is a lesson in what happens when one corrupt man acquires too much power, something that can scarily become reality, which is why he's in our number 4 spot.
All the more reason, don't you think, to simply dispose of you?
Number 3. Rounding out Spider-Man's greatest villains on this list, we have the Green Goblin, who debuted in The Amazing Spider-Man number 14, co-created by Stan Lee and Steve Ditko. If there's one villain who's taken so much away from Spider-Man, it's the Green Goblin. The Green Goblin was once Norman Osborn, the father of Harry Osborn, who in turn was Peter Parker's best friend. immediately creating a deeply personal connection between Spider-Man and the Goblin. Although readers didn't know the identity of the Green Goblin until much later in the comics, Stan Lee and Steve Ditko planned early on to have the character be someone that Peter knew personally. The madness of the Green Goblin combined with his goblin-themed design make for a memorable villain. But what really planted the Green Goblin as one of Spider-Man's greatest arch-enemies was a storyline where he discovered Spider-Man's true identity. With this information, he abducts Peter's girlfriend, Gwen Stacy, and uses her to lure Spider-Man to the Brooklyn Bridge, where they eventually fight. The Goblin tosses Gwen off the bridge, and Spider-Man attempts to save her by catching her with his web, but he soon discovers that she's dead, her neck broken. The Green Goblin has made his way into several of the Spider-Man films, including Tobey Maguire's, Andrew Garfield's, and eventually even Tom Holland's. And in every version, he's making Peter's life miserable.
Itsy bitsy spider went up the water spout. Down came the goblin and took the spider out.
Number 2, Magneto. Co-created by Stan Lee and Jack Kirby, Magneto is someone deeply affected by past traumas. He first appeared in the X-Men #1 in September 1963, and his backstory involves his family dying during the Holocaust, leaving him as a survivor. Suffice it to say, these events shaped his point of view of the world, and humanity's crusade against his people, the mutants, doesn't help heal the wounds of his past. Magneto wants to protect mutant kind from humans looking to persecute them, and because of this, he sometimes goes to extreme lengths to make that happen. While his heart is in the right place, his actions tend to be more radical than need be, which plants him on the side of villainy, all the while making you question whether his actions are just or oppressive. Because of his friendship with Professor Xavier, the villain is able to put aside their different ideologies, even going so far as to help the X-Men in their goal to create a world where humans and mutants can coexist.
You're a fool, Charles.
Besides all of that, Magneto is an extremely strong mutant with powers that grant him control over magnetism and so much more. He is also a charismatic leader, and he displays deeper emotions such as love and sorrow, which helps make readers empathize with him as a character. Also, he has a really cool suit with a really cool helmet that's super recognizable, and that's why he's in our number 2 spot. But, drumroll please, it is time for our number 1 spot. And that spot goes to Dr. Doom, the iconic villain co-created by Stan Lee and Jack Kirby, who debuted in the Fantastic Four #5 in July 1962. The last time we mentioned Dr. Doom, it was about him saving his mother from the clutches of Mephisto with the help of Doctor Strange. This time around, it's because he's the greatest villain co-created by Stan Lee. The ruler of Latveria, Dr. Doom is a powerful sorcerer, master of science, and a very, very arrogant man. Doom thinks that he's the best in the world, and everything he does usually has something to do with keeping that status as the best. Many compare Dr. Doom to Batman, in that he's always prepared, except he's evil. What makes him such a good villain is that, despite his arrogance, he's actually capable of doing the things he claims he can do, and he's got a track record to prove it. However, this hubris has cost him many times in his battles against the Fantastic Four, and eventually leads to his downfall in many situations. Other than his personality, Dr. Doom sports a menacing look. According to Jack Kirby, Dr. Doom's design was the classic conception of death, of approaching death. I saw Dr. Doom as the man in the iron mask, who symbolized approaching death. It was the reason for the armor and the hood. Death is connected with armor and inhuman-like steel. Death is something without mercy, and human flesh contains that element of mercy. Therefore, I had to erase it, and I did it with a mask. Also, with a name like Dr. Doom, how can he not be in the number 1 spot? Honestly, I can name countless things that Dr. Doom has done throughout Marvel's comic history. Like, literally in one story, he uses a time machine. What? He steals powers. The fact that he saved his mom from hell to send her soul to heaven, that's crazy. Dr. Doom is nuts, and honestly, yeah, just go read the comics to get a better idea of just how crazy this character is. Anyway, that is our list of the top 10 villains co-created by Stan Lee. What do you think? Are there any villains that deserve to be in the top 10 instead of the ones we chose? Let us know in the comments below. If you enjoyed our video, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so that you know when we upload next. We'll see you next time. Excelsior!